My wife cheated on me and abandoned our daughters. Years later, she returns with another man's child, asking to form a family. A bit of context here, my ex-wife Angela, 36 years old, and I, 37, met when we were around 25 years old. I was about 24, we were working at the same company, and that's how we met. After being in a relationship for 2 years, we got married, and within 3 years of our marriage, we had 2 daughters, now 9 and 7 years old. The second pregnancy was unexpected, and she wasn't happy about it, but she didn't terminate it, even though I told her it would be okay if she did, as I didn't want to make her go through something she didn't want. After our first daughter, things were still great between us, and we were as in love as we could be, but that changed after the second pregnancy. She became really moody and irritable. We thought this would change after a while, but things only got progressively worse, and my daughter and I learned to walk on eggshells around her. I was taking care of everything. Even though she was supposed to be a stay-at-home mom, she quit her job on her own after our first daughter and did all the housework, as well as taking care of our eldest daughter while I worked. When she got pregnant the second time, we had to hire a maid because she said she was too tired to do the housework in addition to taking care of our daughters. Even though it was a bit out of our budget, I agreed, as I wasn't earning enough at the time. I agreed to hire a maid because I didn't want to inconvenience Angela, especially while she was pregnant. I assumed she would go back to taking care of the house and the girls during the day after our second daughter was born. Also, let me make it clear that I wasn't one of those husbands who did nothing at home after coming back from work. I did everything I could to help, even though I used to be exhausted from working. After she gave birth to our younger daughter, I thought it would take a few months, but then she would recover, and we could get back to our normal life. But several months passed, and she showed no signs of change. She remained just as moody and irritable and refused to do any housework. She just stayed at home all day watching TV. She didn't even play with the girls or anything, and paid our neighbor to take them to the park occasionally. I don't want to sound resentful, but I felt that way because I was working day and night, and she wasn't even doing the minimum at home. It was also getting quite expensive for me to pay a maid to do all the cooking, cleaning, and other household chores. I also had to take care of all the other expenses and wanted to save money for our daughter's future as well. That was becoming almost impossible because Angela refused to help me in any way. So, after nearly 6 months since the birth of our younger daughter, I decided that we couldn't go on like this, and I needed to talk to Angela. I knew this was going to be a difficult discussion, so I asked my parents to take care of our daughters for a day, and they agreed. That day, I sat Angela down and told her that I knew she was tired after 2 pregnancies, but I needed her to help me here and work with me. I explained that having a maid was becoming too expensive for us, and I needed her to keep her word and go back to doing at least some of the household chores so we could renegotiate and reduce the maid's salary, which would allow us to save some money. She opposed the idea and instantly rejected it, saying she was too busy taking care of the girls to do any housework, and that I should earn more instead of making excuses and blaming her for our financial situation. I tried to tell her that I was already doing my best, but that she also needed to do her best if we wanted to make this marriage work. I also mentioned how she wasn't really taking care of the girls because, as far as I knew, she just let them watch TV with her and sit with her for hours while she watched trashy reality shows. This is what the maid had mentioned to me once in a conversation. Soon I realized that mentioning it was a big mistake because she got furious and accused me of spying on her through the maid. After that, she launched into a tirade against me, saying she was no longer going to tolerate this, that she was done being manipulated by me and forced to do all the work, while I did nothing but sit at a desk for a few hours a day. She then told me that it was my fault that I couldn't afford to have a maid, and it was a shame that I had to beg her to help me, as I was supposed to be the man of the house. Everything was really illogical, and she was just clinging to anything to try to make it seem like there was nothing wrong with her for doing nothing all day, and that I was the crazy one for expecting her to actually contribute and do her part in the house. We ended up in a huge fight, and she called me a loser who couldn't afford to be with a woman like her anyway. And I responded by calling her a lazy cow who had already failed at being a good mother, given how our eldest daughter was afraid of her, and now she was also failing as a wife. That comment really hit her, and she shoved me hard. I lost my balance and fell back onto the coffee table very hard, shattering the glass and injuring myself. I had to be rushed to the hospital, and she kept apologizing to me and crying the entire time. Fortunately, I only hurt my back, and the injuries were superficial, but I could have been seriously injured, and I no longer trusted Angela. I told her she had to move out because I didn't trust her around the girls, as who knew when she might lose control with them and end up hurting them too. I told my parents to take care of our daughters until she moved out. For a week, she kept protesting and said she would never let this happen again, but I simply didn't trust her anymore. I almost filed for divorce, but she begged me to give her a chance, and by the end of the week, we came to the conclusion that she would go live with her parents for a while and undergo therapy. Only when a medical professional deemed her fit would I allow her to move back in with us. Obviously, something was very wrong with her because happy people don't act that way, but she was willing to work on it and get better. Also, I didn't want my daughters to grow up without their mother, so I agreed not to divorce at that time and to give our marriage another chance. We were also receiving couples therapy while living apart, but eventually it all turned out to be futile because she ended up cheating on me. My parents had moved in with me to help with my daughters while Angela was living with her parents. We went to couples therapy sessions weekly, and things seemed to be getting better for a while. I was also in contact with her therapist, who told me she had been suffering from postpartum depression but was improving. One of her symptoms had been anger issues, which she didn't have before, but they got out of control when she pushed me, and that was a wake-up call for both of us. This continued for almost a year, and around the 6th month, I even allowed her to visit our daughters under my supervision. Slowly, she was returning to her old self, and I was happy to see that. Finally, I felt that our situation was improving and that we could really make it work. But then, suddenly, she stopped coming to our therapy sessions without any explanation. She also stopped responding to me, but I knew she was making progress because her therapist kept me informed. It didn't make sense to me, and for weeks I kept trying to talk to her, but she just ignored me and said she wanted some time for herself. Finally, after almost 3 months of avoiding me, I decided to visit her at her parents' house. I hadn't done it before because her parents didn't like me and blamed me, thinking I was the one who had driven their daughter crazy and made her act like that. So, she had told me it would be better if I didn't visit her while she was living with them, as it would only lead to a lot of drama, and that was the last thing we needed. But I broke that rule and visited anyway, as she had been acting distant and avoiding therapy sessions, and even when she occasionally showed up, she seemed disinterested, and I just couldn't understand it. When I tried to talk to her in person, by phone, or even by text, she told me everything was fine, but I could tell by her behavior that she was definitely hiding something from me. The day I arrived at her parents' house, I expected her to be home, but she wasn't there. When I asked her parents where she was, they told me they weren't authorized to tell me and slammed the door in my face. I could tell they were enjoying this, and I had a bad feeling about it, so I decided to call Angela while standing in front of her parents' house. I tried calling her several times, but she didn't answer, and with every passing second, I became more and more paranoid. So, I decided to snoop around the house and find a way in on my own. I went to the backyard because I knew her parents usually kept the kitchen door open. But I didn't even need to go that far because I saw Angela sitting on the swing her parents had in the backyard. The bad news was that she was sitting with her back to me because she was kissing a man I didn't recognize. It's been a long time since I saw her, but it's etched into my brain because it was the most horrible moment of my life and I haven't been able to forget it even today. The guy she was kissing backed off as soon as he saw me, and when Angela turned around, I had already started walking back to my car. She caught up with me and tried to stop me, but I didn't listen to anything she said because I was in shock. She tried to grab me, but I pushed her away and told her not to touch me, so she didn't, and I got back to my car and started driving back home. I blocked her everywhere as soon as I got home so she wouldn't have a chance to explain herself, and I told my parents I wanted them to find a lawyer for me, and I informed them of what I had just witnessed when I visited Angela's parents' house. I didn't see or hear from her until we had to meet with the court-appointed mediator for our divorce settlement. By then, I had practically become a robot and was only functioning for the sake of my daughters, but I had shut down emotionally. I didn't feel anything even when I found out Angela was relinquishing her parental rights because she had decided she didn't want to be with us anymore and wanted to be with the guy, let's call him Jan, who I had seen her with the other day. He was a childhood friend of hers, and although they had drifted apart after high school, they had reconnected when she moved back in with her parents, and apparently she had fallen in love with him. Her parents also supported this, which probably explains why they didn't want to tell me anything that day. Apparently, they had always wanted her to end up with Jan, and they were happy Angela was finally choosing herself and her own happiness, as if she had ever been capable of doing anything else. The divorce was a long process because, even though she had been cheating on me, she still wanted to qualify for alimony. It took us a while, but my lawyer and I fought hard to ensure she received nothing in the divorce, because everything was legitimately mine since I had been the one paying for everything for so long while she did nothing but watch TV at home. It has been 5 years since the divorce was finally settled, and we achieved our goal of making sure she walked away empty-handed. The months I spent dealing with the divorce were some of the hardest times for me, but I knew I couldn't give up because I had to take care of my daughters since they had no one else but me. My parents were obviously very helpful and supportive, and I can never thank them enough for being there for me while I balanced work and taking care of my daughters. It's been 5 years since then, and although at the time the divorce seemed like the worst thing that could happen, I am grateful for it now because I don't think I would be in the place I am today if it weren't for my decision to leave Angela. Life has really treated me well since then, and I am in a much better place now in every aspect. Since then, we have moved into a bigger house because I now earn more and don't have to spend money on anyone aside from myself and my daughters. My parents live nearby and come over from time to time as well. I have friends who love me, and my daughters are as happy as can be. That's all a man needs, and I am very grateful to the universe that everything is going well for me now. Or at least it was until Angela showed up again a few days ago. The girls were at school, and I was about to leave for work when I opened the door. Angela was standing outside with a child by her side. The child couldn't have been more than 3 or 4 years old, and I knew this had to be Angela's son. I was shocked to see her standing outside my door. I was still trying to process it when she started crying and said she was here to apologize and make things right with me. She told me she was finally ready to be a family again and give our marriage another chance. I couldn't believe she was back here after all these years and now wanted to give our marriage another chance, as if she were the one making that decision. In an instant, I made a decision and decided to close the door and reject her because I didn't want to let her in, whatever this was. But before that, I told her this was no longer her family. I stopped being her husband the day she cheated on me with Jan. The divorce was just a legal obligation, and she herself had relinquished custody of her daughters, so she no longer had any right to refer to us as her family. After saying that, I closed the door and told her to leave because I didn't want her anywhere near my property. I might have also cursed her out because I was really angry, but I refrained from doing so because of the child. I could hear her crying outside my door for a couple of minutes after closing it, but I decided to ignore it, and once I made sure the coast was clear, I went to work. I tried very hard not to think about it because it would only weaken my resolve, and I couldn't afford to let that happen. I almost managed to forget that Angela had even shown up at my house, but as soon as I got home from work, I received a call from my parents demanding an explanation as to why I had rejected her. They told me that Angela had contacted them after I rejected her and closed the door in her face, and she was devastated. My parents said they were the ones who had given her my new address and told her to visit me, as she was in the process of divorcing Jan and finally had a chance to make things right with me. They told me that Angela had contacted them about a month ago, and this had been in the works for quite some time. My parents believed that it was time for me to think about my daughters because my daughters needed a mother. So, they decided that she deserved another chance and told her where to find me and what to say to me. I was very angry with them because it wasn't their place to forgive her and decide to give her another chance without even asking me if I would be okay with it. It could have been really bad if the girls had been home, and it was really reckless of them to do something like that. So, I told them what I thought, but they refused to acknowledge that they had made a mistake because they had helped me during my divorce by taking care of the girls, and even now they occasionally look after the girls. They believed that whether I wanted to reconcile with Angela or not wasn't my decision to make alone, and that they had the same right to decide what was best for the girls, and I couldn't take that away from them. I thought it was ridiculous that they believed that because, at the end of the day, they were my daughters and not theirs. Although I respected and would always be grateful for what they did for me during my divorce, I don't think it was their place to let Angela back into my life. We had an argument, but they told me that I was the one out of place here and that I was being selfish by not giving Angela another chance. They told me that they had done their due diligence and were sure that she was now a different woman and deserved to be a part of my daughters' lives. Even when I reminded them that she had given up her rights, they said it was insulting that I believed they would endanger my daughters or me. And they accused me of ruining their lives by being too arrogant to accept that they needed their mother. It's been a few days now, and I don't think I was inappropriate or selfish because I've thought a lot about this. I stand by my decision not to give my ex-wife another chance to be a mother. Update 1. It has been about a week since Angela showed up at my door with her son, and I recently discovered the truth about her relationship with my parents. Honestly, it's so disturbing that I don't even know where to start. and I'm still struggling to process it myself. It's amazing how all of them betrayed me without batting an eye. Apparently, not only were they the ones who gave her my new address, but they also stayed in contact with her the entire time. I had eliminated her from my life after the divorce, but they didn't because they believed she would come back at some point. They didn't talk much, maybe once a month, but that was enough to make me feel betrayed. Jan made Angela give up her rights after she was served the divorce papers, giving her an ultimatum: either abandon her family and start a new life with him, or maintain contact with her daughters and fight for custody. But that would mean leaving him behind. It was a tough choice for her, according to my parents, but she ended up going with Jan to form a new family with him instead of staying with the family she already had. My parents said that Angela contacted them shortly after I filed for divorce to tell them about her situation and ask for their help because she wanted to stay in touch with her daughters in private. She told them she was between a rock and a hard place on both sides. Either way, she couldn't see her daughters because I was fighting for full custody with supervised visitation rights, while Jan had ordered her to abandon her daughters entirely, even if she fought for custody. The chances of her getting partial custody were slim, given the circumstances of our divorce and her history of problems controlling her temper. So, fighting for custody seemed like a waste of time and resources for her. There was a very real possibility that she could lose both Jan and custody of our daughters if she decided to fight in the end, and that's before my parents intervened. They met with her privately, and she practically begged them to let her stay in contact with her daughters, asking them to act as a bridge between them. She was aware that once she gave up her rights, she would have no visitation rights, not even supervised ones. But my parents would have those rights, and they planned to exploit that. They successfully deceived me for years, going behind my back to let Angela meet with our daughters. They did this because Angela's situation moved them, and they realized they couldn't, in good conscience, keep a mother away from her daughters. Stabbing their own son in the back for years, however, didn't affect them at all. They told me that every time I left our daughters at their house, they would invite Angela over and let her spend time with them. My daughters never told me they were meeting with their mother because my parents bribed them with toys and sweets to stay silent. I always assumed they were talking about my parents' actual friends, whom I already knew. But apparently that's what my parents told my daughters to refer to their mother as in case I asked about their day. I couldn't believe that my daughters had also been lying to me, but I forgave them because they are just children, and also because Angela and my parents had really manipulated and intimidated them into keeping quiet. After I learned the truth from my parents when I asked my daughters if they had been meeting with their mother behind my back, they started crying and told me they couldn't tell me because they would be punished by God if they did. Angela and my parents had really ingrained in their heads that there would be severe consequences if they told me the truth, which is why they had been so secretive and vague the whole time. I also felt like a terrible parent for never asking my daughters which of my parents' friends were spending time with them, because it could easily have been someone else, someone more dangerous than Angela, and I would never have found out. But I'm going to put an end to this right now, as I'm getting a restraining order against all of them. I already have written proof of this since my parents sent me an email to tell me the truth a couple of days after my fight with them. They believed the email would make me realize how desperate Angela was to continue being a mother to her daughters without losing the supposed love of her life, and somehow that would make me forgive everyone involved. But all it did was make me realize that everyone here was a nasty liar, and I couldn't trust anyone anymore. It's also ironic how Angela gave up her parental rights and had to resort to meeting with our daughters in secret as if it were a crime, all because Jan didn't want her to have any contact with her previous family, and he was supposedly her true love. But now they are getting divorced, and all of that turned out to be in vain. They even had a child together, but according to my parents, Jan now wanted nothing to do with her or their child because he had received a job offer and was moving in a couple of months. Angela had started working again recently, and their child had started kindergarten here, so she didn't want to move with him, which is why they had been fighting for a long time. Finally, everything came to a head 3 months ago when Jan told her that they were done and that he was accepting that job and moving. He no longer had any interest in being a family man because it clearly meant he would have to sacrifice his own future and happiness just to make her happy, and he wasn't willing to do that. All of this was meant to make me feel sorry for Angela, but the only purpose it served was to make me feel that justice had finally been served. I've already talked to my lawyer, and the petition for restraining orders has been filed. My daughters and I have also had a proper discussion about all of this, and I've told them that from now on, They will never see their grandparents or their mother again. They seem okay with that for now, but we will still go to therapy and try to work things out because I'm sure this will be hard for them, and it probably has been quite hard for them for the last 5 years. But all of this ends now. Update 2. Hi everyone, thank you so much for all the concern and support. I'm really grateful that so many people have been sending lovely messages and blessings for my daughters. My parents and Angela have been served with restraining orders, and they are supposed to appear in court in a few days. I don't know how they feel about it because I've blocked them on every possible platform, and I've also told my friends not to talk to them in case they try to contact them. I've also increased security around my house and have been working from home for a couple of days. I talked to my daughter's school authorities and told them about the situation. Initially, I didn't intend to let them go to school for a few days, but I didn't want their education to suffer because of Angela and my parents. So now, the teachers have to keep an eye on them and not let anyone but me pick them up after school. I'm doing everything I can to make sure they can't contact us because I'm sure they will try. So far, everything has gone well, and I hope that after getting that restraining order, they will continue to stay away. Update 3. Hi everyone. This will be a brief update, but we managed to get that restraining order, and for the next 5 years, those 3 maniacs will have to keep their distance from me and my daughters, unless they want to face terrible consequences. Obviously, I will continue to keep all the security measures I took for a while, because the last time I saw them, they seemed really angry, and I don't want to take any chances. My daughters and I are attending regular family counseling sessions, and I believe we will make a lot of progress in the coming months. In fact, we've already made considerable progress. Honestly, all I want now is for my daughters to be happy, and that's it. So, please continue to send us your best wishes, we need them. Update 4. Unfortunately, I have to share an unpleasant situation that occurred recently. This time, my mother and Angela showed up at my house unannounced. I was completely unprepared when I opened the door after they knocked and found them standing there. Angela started yelling and demanding to talk to me, while my mother stood behind her with a defiant expression. I immediately decided to stay calm and tried to de-escalate the situation. I asked them to leave, explaining that it wasn't the time or place to talk, and reminding them that they had a restraining order and couldn't be there. But Angela flatly refused and continued yelling, accusing me of breaking up her family and depriving her of her daughters. The situation became increasingly tense, and I realized there was no reasoning with them at that moment. Seeing the situation worsen, I decided to send my daughters to their room to protect them from the argument. I told them to stay there until I called for them. Meanwhile, I tried to keep Angela and my mother as far away from them as possible. The argument went on for a while, with accusations and yelling from all sides. Finally, I managed to convince them to leave, but not before making it clear that I didn't want to see them on my property again or I would call the police. I thought about doing it at that moment, but I didn't want to traumatize my daughters any further. I planned to meet with my lawyers soon to discuss what options we have. After they left, I went to comfort my daughters and explained what had happened as calmly as possible. It was a tough moment for all of us, but I hope we can get through it together. Angela's son wasn't there, which would have made this situation even worse. What saddens me the most is that the poor boy has to live with that kind of mother, which can't be easy.